The Nazi regime preached duty, sacrifice, and national purity. Behind that facade, Göring amassed a private art collection from stolen masterpieces. Himmler ran slave labor enterprises through the SS, and Bormann funneled millions into hidden accounts. Hitler's inner circle didn't just plunder occupied Europe. They spent the war stealing from one another. How did a regime built on ideology end up operating like a criminal syndicate? The answer is buried in the paperwork they left behind. Inside the Jeu de Paume Museum in Paris, crates of confiscated paintings arrived daily, each tagged with a number and a name. Sometimes Rothschild, sometimes Rosenberg, sometimes anonymous. The paperwork was precise. On the ERR accession sheet, line item R342, dated the 5th of July, 1942, a Picasso taken from Paul Rosenberg's collection is marked for transfer. The recipient is Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring. His art advisor, Walter Hofer, sent a telegram confirming the selection. A catalog entry in Göring's Carinhall inventory records the painting's arrival within days, slotting it between a Van Dyck and a Renoir, all seized under the same bureaucratic system. This was not random looting. The ERR produced inventories in triplicate, stamped and filed, each object's journey mapped from Paris to Berlin. Selection lists bore Göring's initials, or the phrase sehr wichtig zu Göring. Transport manifests logged the crate's movement by rail, custom stamps granting free passage through occupied Europe. Museum curators in Berlin and Munich filed formal protests when Göring's office overruled their claims. The paperwork always won. The Rothschild collection became a case study in how official channels masked personal theft. ERR records matched item for item with the Rothschild family's own inventories. After the war, Allied investigators traced the same accession numbers from the Jeu de Paume ledgers to Carinhall's catalog and eventually to restitution files in Washington and London. Each step in the process, from seizure to selection, shipment, and cataloging, was designed to look legitimate while funneling masterpieces into Göring's private gallery. Bureaucracy was Göring's camouflage. The ERR's paperwork model would soon be mirrored in other rackets, but here it served a double purpose: legitimizing theft and consolidating power. In the Reich's inner circle, a Vermeer or a Rembrandt was more than a trophy. It was leverage, traded for favors, used to build alliances, and sometimes withheld to punish rivals. The art cartel was not a sideshow. It was the operating logic of a regime where every official act doubled as a private transaction. Inside Himmler's empire, profit and extermination became indistinguishable. The SS Main Economic and Administrative Office, WVHA, sat atop a corporate structure that blurred the line between state and syndicate. Oswald Pohl, Himmler's financial architect, ran the WVHA as a holding company with over 25 subsidiaries, each registered as a private firm but controlled through SS command. The most notorious was DEST, Deutsche Erd- und Steinwerke, whose quarries and brickworks drew on prisoners from Dachau, Mauthausen, and Gusen. In June 1943 alone, DEST delivered 1.1 million cubic meters of stone, much of it destined for Nazi prestige projects. Each shipment was tracked by invoice. A surviving Dachau brickworks bill dated June 1943 lists thousands of tons delivered at a fraction of market price, the labor cost marked simply as camp allocation. WVHA's accounting was relentless. Amtsgruppe A, the SS financial office, kept ledgers of every asset seized, from gold watches to dental fillings. The dental gold ledger, later entered as evidence at Nuremberg, recorded 262,711 items melted and deposited into the Reichsbank. Each entry bore a victim's number, not a name. Profits from these operations, stone, bricks, and gold, flowed through the WVHA's central accounts and then outward, masked by contracts with firms like IG Farben and Siemens. DEST invoices, DAW payrolls, and the gold ledgers all converged in Pohl's office, where the SS's share of the war economy was quietly laundered into cash. This was not improvisation, but a business model. The SS used forced labor and theft as industrial policy, then disguised the proceeds behind ordinary-looking GmbH paperwork. Yet as the Reich's fortunes waned, these profits needed safe passage, routes out of Germany, records erased, and ledgers concealed. The scale of the operation demanded a new kind of gatekeeper, and with every Reichsmark siphoned from a camp or a quarry, the need for internal control and internal rivalry only grew. Martin Bormann understood that in a regime obsessed with control, the real power lay in the flow of money. By February 1944, a directive from the party chancellery ordered that any payment above 500,000 Reichsmarks required his personal approval. This was not just an administrative hurdle, it was a choke point. A single payment order, dated 17th of February 1944, rerouted 3 million Reichsmarks from the party's Berlin fund to a Swiss intermediary. The transfer memo, flagged in OSS cables a year later, referenced Zurich account number 458, which would reappear in post-war Allied investigations as a red flag for Nazi flight capital. Bormann's system worked in layers. On the surface, funds moved through official channels, the Reichsbank, the party's Kanzleiabteilung, and the Ministry of Finance. But behind the paperwork, Bormann's trusted agents, often lawyers or mid-level accountants, created a web of offshore accounts registered to shell companies like Deutsche Treuhand GmbH. Operation Eagle Flight, referenced in OSS files, described a pattern of large foreign transfers masked as payments for diplomatic services or relief shipments. Each transaction left a trail of coded memos and authorization slips, with Bormann's initials appearing in the margins. By early 1945, Allied intelligence was tracking these financial maneuvers. An OSS cable from March 1945 flagged Zurich account 458 as a suspected Nazi escape channel, with unexplained inflows matching party records. The sums involved, millions of Reichsmarks, gold bars, bearer bonds, were not just insurance policies. They were the architecture of a parallel state, ready to survive the Reich's collapse. Bormann's control over these secret channels made him indispensable and dangerous. When money left the Reich's official system, it did not just vanish. It became leverage, bargaining power, and in the eyes of Bormann's rivals, a threat that demanded constant surveillance. Inside Hitler's circle, information became as valuable as gold or art. On July 23, 1943, a confidential report landed on Martin Bormann's desk. The subject was a dispute in Göring's household over a Faberge egg, its value contested by Göring's chief steward and art advisor Walter Hofer. The report did not just catalog objects, it cataloged weaknesses. Bormann's informants, often disguised as staff or minor clerks, recorded every argument and indiscretion, feeding a steady stream of gossip and scandal into the party chancellery's files. These dossiers were less about justice than leverage. Himmler's SS, always eager for advantage, maintained its own intelligence archives. One file, labeled Goebbels' Private Affairs, detailed the propaganda minister's infidelities and questionable art deals. The SS Kriminalpolizei compiled these records not for prosecution, but as political insurance. If Goebbels threatened SS interests, Himmler could hint at the existence of compromising evidence. The same tactic applied to Göring and even to Bormann himself. No one was immune. Surveillance seeped into every corner of the regime. Letters were opened, telephones tapped, servants were paid to report on overheard conversations. The July 1943 Faberge egg quarrel was just one entry in a growing ledger of mutual suspicion. Each leader built private archives of dirt on his rivals, ready to be deployed if fortunes turned. By late 1943, the Nazi leadership resembled less a government than a cartel of blackmailers, each man watching his back while plotting his next move. The question was no longer who held the most power, but who had the most secrets. Convoys of sealed freight cars pulled away from Paris under armed guard, each wagon packed floor to ceiling with crates stamped with ERR inventory codes. On May 8, 1944, a manifest listed 27 crates in a single shipment. Paintings, jewelry, and sculptures stripped from French collections were bound for secret depots deep inside Germany and Austria. The numbers told their own story. Thousands of objects, each with a case number, each matched to a confiscated estate, each piece a line item in a private fortune. The logistics were precise. Railway officers received detailed instructions. They were to reroute high-value cargo to underground bunkers, avoid bombed-out marshalling yards, and deliver directly to storage mines at Altaussee or Merkers. Inside the salt caverns, crates were stacked in rows, their contents hidden behind false manifests or relabeled as industrial material. The Altaussee records, later uncovered by the Allies, cataloged not just the art, but the scale of concealment. Entire galleries were boxed and buried, awaiting a Reich that would never return. In the final year, the Reich's looting machine became a race against defeat. Artworks, gold, and archives vanished into the earth, shielded by paperwork and secrecy. The cartel's reach extended from Parisian museums to Alpine tunnels. Its final act was not destruction, but disappearance. Allied investigators arrived in Bavaria with a list in hand, inventory code MFAAA12, stamped and initialed by Nazi officials who never imagined defeat. In a vault at the Bavarian State Bank, they found what the paperwork predicted: 262 paintings, each logged with meticulous detail, each matched to an ERR manifest or a Carinhall catalog. The Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives officers, known as the Monuments Men, cross-checked accession numbers against the Jeu de Paume records and found the same art that had vanished from Paris, now stacked in crates marked for Göring's private use. The trail was not subtle. A bank receipt dated April 20th, 1945 recorded the transfer of 2 million Reichsmarks from party accounts to a numbered deposit, one last attempt to move cash before the Reich's collapse. The signatories were gone, but the evidence remained: ledgers, manifests, and transfer slips, each more damning than the last. With the regime's leaders in flight or dead, it fell to the paperwork to tell the final story. The Nazi state, so obsessed with order and secrecy, left behind an archive of its own undoing. In the end, the real legacy was not just the stolen gold or the hidden art, but the proof of a government that spent its dying days stealing from itself. The Third Reich did not just collapse under Allied bombs, it was already being looted from within by the men who claimed to own it. Behind the regime's calls for sacrifice, Göring, Himmler, and Bormann built private empires, each fueled by theft, sabotage, and mutual surveillance. Today, when power is concentrated without scrutiny, corruption follows. The Third Reich did not just collapse under Allied bombs, it was already being looted from within by the men who claimed to own it.